This is a journal of a life well lived, an authentic life, a journey to find the quiet moments, the handmade, the small towns, the pastoral scenes, the homemade, and the importance of the little things. For years, I've dreamt of exploring what live authentic truly means, with my friends, my favorite people, and the rambling storytellers I meet on the way. Let's go on a journey together. So 13 years ago, we started Folk. It all began with a print magazine in the fall of 2011. For many years, we did a lot of issues. You can still get them as back issues, but times have changed and we've moved on from print. We've had highs and lows and everything in between. And in the new world, it seems like video is the best place to be. So welcome to the first episode of Live Authentic, a program that is a few years in the making. And I'm so excited to welcome you here to the very old farm that I live on. And I'm so excited to introduce you to all of my friends and makers that I love, and people that I love, and people that I've met over the last 13 years. That will be coming in and out of the screen. So, last year, my book came out. It's a beautiful love story to my love of a rural life, an authentic life, a life in the small towns, and a life of appreciating the small things. And that is what I hope we accomplish here. So, if you'll join me, let's go on a journey together.
When I first moved here, I didn't know how much I would love it. I thought, oh, this is just a rural town. I really didn't understand all that was here. It's what you see when we have our parades and our events. You just went to the sidewalk sale. I know the guy working here. I waved to someone else. You get to know people in a town. You get to know what makes a community, and what makes a community is people who want to be part of it and interact. Well, let's go down Bank Street. Go around.
What was the biggest adjustment coming from the city, New York City, to Warwick?
So that's a great question, Ben. I was used to walking out my door and seeing people. What I didn't realize is that in a rural community, you have to go downtown. You have to go to the farmer's market. You have to go to the school events to see people and engage. So I grew up in the city. You walked out your door, you saw a ton of people. But I've learned that the interactions here are so wonderful because you come to the concert. Oh, there's the bus that goes to Manhattan. You come downtown and you go to a concert, an open air concert, and you run into your neighbors, you run into people. And that's the difference between a rural area and the city. You all gather at community events here as opposed to just randomly running into each other on the street. So I've learned to really love that. So if we want to see folks, we just say, oh, there's a concert going in town tonight. Let's go down and see who's there.
This is Scarlet Bee Balm, Monarda didyma. It's in the mint family, so as you can see, it spreads like mint, and every part of the plant is edible. Native to the United States and deep foundations in native medicinals and remedies. The plant itself has a super high concentration of something called thymol, which is the active ingredient in most commercial mouthwashes. So the Oswego Indians of the Leatherstocking region of central New York actually use this plant as a homeopathic mouthwash for all of their dental issues, caries, cavities, sore teeth, toothaches. But it's a really amazing plant. It has so many different uses, and it's equally as beautiful as it is useful. So like I said, it's in the mint family. So just like mint, it spreads easily. You can strip a couple leaves off the bottom, pop this in water, you'll get roots. Or you can just grab it by the roots and put it where you want it. It spreads, but it's really well behaved. It plays well with others. As long as you keep after it, you can plant it in an ornamental garden. And who wouldn't? I grow it mostly because it's beautiful. Super native, pollinator friendly. The hummingbirds love it. It's a host species for the glasswing sphinx moths and the hummingbird moths. Native bumblebees love it, and even the non-native honeybees that are so integral into our agriculture and our livelihood love it as well. So very, very friendly for the native pollinators in the United States. We need more of them and we need to protect them. So you should grow bee balm at your house too.
I was first introduced to J. Stark, a Charleston, South Carolina brand, about a decade ago. I had several of their totes and pieces, and a tornado decided I didn't need those anymore. They were never found, or they were found in a field destroyed. Today, though, J. Stark sent me this, a logo tote. I'd been coveting it for a while, and when I got back from Boston, it was on my kitchen counter. I love the bright color. I never go for color. But there's something about the crisp freshness of what would be an otherwise very classic tote that I'm smitten with. And that orange,
I'm excited to talk to you about quilts. I have loved them for as long as I can remember. They're cozy and keep you warm, but they're an amazing piece of American history. We've talked a lot about how quilts are stories, and I suppose I collect stories with every quilt that I have. When you open a quilt, you can see that often there's a pattern, and this is a log cabin quilt, and it's a classic pattern, and it's done in feed sack fabrics, which is interesting because the log cabin pattern itself is a much older trend than the fabrics that are used in this quilt. And we can date a quilt by the fabrics that are used in it and the pattern. We have Crazy Quilt here on the back. But when you look at any textile in a quilt, you often sometimes see things that are much older. We have an 1860s madder dye fabric here and over here. And that just meant that the person was thrifty and kept the textile for a time that they could use it. And people kept scraps of fabric because we had no fast fashion and we didn't have Joann fabrics. So they would keep textiles for a very long time. And when it suited them, stitch something beautiful of it that would keep them warm and also add beauty to their home. And we see in this quilt that classic log cabin log cabin pattern. And over here, we see a much older quilt that has some of those madder dyes. And I absolutely adore, you can see this is beautiful muslin on the back. I adore the printing history we see in any quilt. I always think of quilts are textile art, but I'm fascinated by the way things are made. And I always think about the fact that this is a printed material. This is something that can establish time frame much like a font. And it tells us a story of when it was made originally as this fabric, and then when someone made it into something beautiful. Every single quilt is a story. They vary in beauty and personal taste, but their charm and their whimsy is in the fact that they're really assemblage art. They're printed matter and they're assemblage art. This is a yo-yo down here. I could no more sew a yo-yo than fly to the moon, but I'm enchanted every time I pick it up. I think about where it came from, when it was made, who made it, why they made it, where they were when they made it. And I feel like the energy with which it was made is still with it. And I lovingly hold quilts when I pick them up thinking, this is a beautiful thing that someone made a very long time ago. And I love that it's still useful. Storing them, I have them displayed here. I would never hang them on a wall because it would weaken them. Best way to store a quilt is to roll it up like this and put it in an old pillowcase. It'll keep it dust free. If you fold a quilt for too long, it will weaken the seam of the fabric. This is a hexie quilt. I love the hexie shape. This is not something I would probably decorate with because of the color palette, but I love taking it out as fall approaches. I love the fact that the person who made this dyed muslin. This was all white muslin that was dyed, which gives it this really uneven feel, which I think is really quite lovely for the season. And so what's next as we explore quilts is understanding the process to making them. This is a quilt top, and it's light as a feather and would be a great tablecloth. And it's a simple patchwork. But when you look at what's in there, it's not simple at all.
Hey, Christy, what are those?
Well, Ben, these are my newest obsession. Well, it started with the little strawberries, seeing these on a friend's Instagram account, and I was smitten. It's spun cotton, and I have been so intrigued by it for a long time, seeing other artists make things out of spun cotton. I had no idea what was the process or what it was made out of, just cute things. So this artist shared how she made them. So, of course, I had to make them. I had to find a pincushion just like hers, put them all in there. Well, then one thing led to another. I got to thinking about fall and the pincushion workshop that I'm going to be doing at Southern Supper that day. And so I thought, what if I could do pumpkins? So I went back out to my studio and I got to playing around with the cotton and it's taking aluminum foil and hot gluing it to the end of your little pin, and then you take glue, watered down glue, and brush it on, and then you start spinning the cotton around that aluminum foil. And so I knew I couldn't make a pumpkin shape just like the strawberries were easy because they didn't have to be, you just put a little glob and then it's all in the paint. With the pumpkins, I had to take a little pin and kind of make indentions like, of course, a pumpkin. Then I had to I didn't have orange paint, so I had to mix my acrylic paints. And then I thought, should I add a stem? Because these had the cute little leaves, but I wasn't sure. So I just add just a tiny little drop of the green paint. And I was just so taken with them. So I let them, they had to dry overnight. So I woke up early the next morning and had to run into the living room to see if they were dry. And here they are in the pincushion that we made at our last Southern Supper. And used the little pumpkin stems. So I've got to make more of these now. And then it's just, I don't know, going down a rabbit hole. So of course I had to make a lot, and then I had to put them in this one, and then I had to paint them pink, because sometimes they start out, well, when it's a new little strawberry, they're just a pale pink. So I've just had the best time, and I want to make more.
This recipe can be somewhat divisive. Everyone has some variation on this. For some people, it includes sugar. Others, it includes vinegar, or perhaps it doesn't include either. And we've all had cucumbers and onions, but we've all probably had it a different way. My standard is my Aunt June's recipe. And like most Southern recipes, she didn't have one. It was just a little bit of this and a little bit of that. And so, here I am sharing a recipe that really isn't a recipe at all. But it's summer. Cucumbers are abundant in the garden. And this is one of my most nostalgic favorites. Every summer, Aunt June would make cucumbers and onions. The cucumbers would always be from the garden, the same garden I grow today. And the onions would inevitably be store-bought because we never think to plant onions at the appropriate time. So, I'm making this recipe in one of my favorite Anchor Hawking jars. I typically use these to keep my flour or my sugar in, but I like this for cucumbers and onions because it feels like a play on old-fashioned crocks that you would use for pickling. So here we have a gallon jar. And Christie has peeled the cucumbers fresh from the garden. And you don't have to peel the cucumbers. It is a matter of preference, but Aunt June peeled them, so I've peeled them. She's layering the thin cucumbers with layers of very thin onions. You can use yellow, red, or white onions. I had white on hand, and I do believe that is what Aunt June used, so that is what I'm using. And between each of the layers, she's giving a generous pouring of salt and sugar. We're using kosher salt. You can use whatever you want. And if you don't like your pickles sweet, you probably won't like your cucumbers and onions sweet. So you can skip the sugar, but I refuse. You could skip the salt, but you probably wouldn't have anything worth eating. So always add the salt. And we're just going to continue to make the layers until we've either filled the gallon or run out of cucumbers. But it's summer in Kentucky. We will never run out of cucumbers. And on top, we are adding some chopped dill. It's from my garden. You don't have to use dill, but I like it because it's another play on pickles. And some people add tomatoes at this point. Some people add peppers, but I like to keep it classic and simple. And on top of that, we're going to fill the vessel with half water, half vinegar. And that will just fill to the top. But if you don't love vinegar, you can reduce that amount. Some people reduce it altogether, but I don't think those are the right way to do it. But we're not here to argue. And at the very end, I'm going to add a little bit of pickling spices. You don't have to. I just like to add a little something special. Aunt June certainly never did. You could also add black pepper. You probably should add that. But in this video, I forgot. So when I was a kid, Aunt June would make these, and they would set for a couple of days in the refrigerator so that all the cucumbers and the onions would absorb the salt, the sugar, the vinegar. And they would have a great, crunchy, pickled taste. These will last for a week or so. Flores Lane. Or maybe you just call it Trish. Whatever you want to call it. My favorite candles, made by Trish Baden in West Hollywood, California. You should get some. She'd love it. I never went to summer camp as a child, but I loved the aesthetic. I never wanted to go to summer camp as a child, but I have always loved the aesthetic. There is just something so timeless about the greens, the browns, the nature, the canoes, the campfires, the whole culture of it all. But as a child, I never wanted to go. But in the October 2009 issue, editor Nancy Soriano first introduced us to Camp Wandawega. And while I still didn't want to go to summer camp, I did want to someday go to Camp Wandawega, a former camp turned oasis somewhere in the remote parts of Wisconsin, a couple hours north of Chicago, became a place that I knew I one day had to visit. Back in the early days of Instagram, Camp Wandawega became a hotspot for Instagrammers to visit. The Wes Anderson sort of fantasy land makes for the perfect backdrop for countless advertising campaigns that you probably didn't realize were even photographed there, or a million Instagrammer and now influencer photos that you probably also didn't realize were created somewhere that is very much real and not just some set or soundstage. But summer at Camp Wandawega in Wisconsin is a place that has been coming to life over the last 15 or so years. The owners have taken the camp aesthetic to the extreme, but it's inviting, it's welcoming. It's a place you dream of going over and over again. And I am so thankful that a few weeks ago, I made my first of hopefully what will be many visits. The locals call it camp. To me, I think I'll always call it Camp Wandawega, because it feels surreal that I got invited to go to there.
My Aunt June was my neighbor, but she was the one who taught me to cook, to garden, to do so many domestic things. She was the grandmother I didn't get to have, and for so many of us, she was simply Aunt June. Today, she would be 100. A century ago, she was born at the house I now own, the house she grew up in, and the house she later built her own next to, and I, of course, would grow up in a house on the other side of that. This cake, the pea-picking cake, is one of the favorite things that she made. A simple, doctored, yellow cake mix. One of those that's straight out of the 60s or the 70s. Throw in Jell-O instant pudding mix, and you've got the perfect timepiece. Mandarin oranges, pineapples, Cool Whip. It takes us all back. Sputnik is likely floating somewhere in the sky. But for me, it's nostalgic. It reminds me of my childhood spent calling Aunt June on the phone, 4963. I will always remember that number, and saying, "Aunt June, can I come over?" I, of course, already knew she was home. I already knew no one was there because my bedroom window overlooked her yard. They say that at one point, when she started dating Brother Holiday, the man that would later become her second husband, I, with my kindergarten scribbling, put a sign on the door that said, "Go away, Aunt June is mine, you can't have her." I didn't know the story until I was 25 or so, and it does check out. She's the one who took me everywhere in her blue Oldsmobile, took me to those American Legion auxiliary events, the horse show out in town, to Bible school with my other cousins, the one that, with Brother Holiday, taught me card games. And sadly, I have forgotten how to play Rook, but there is hope that someone will teach me someday. She taught me to bake, be it chocolate chip cookies or red velvet cake, Italian cream, which I would perfect long after she was gone, or this pea-picking cake. And no, I don't know where the name comes from, but I do know it's best served cold. It's best in the summer, and I hope you'll enjoy it. And I hope it will make you think of those special women in your life, be it the women from your little white church, which she also went to, or the ones next door, or the ones you share family with. Aunt June was one of the most influential people in my life, and a century after she was born, I'm so grateful that I got a few years with her.